The US is planning to send Kyiv the Abrams main battle tank in its more advanced M1 A2 configuration, rather than the older A1 version that the military has in storage. Why does Ukraine want the US M1 Abrams? Kyiv has pleaded with its partners to send Western heavy battle tanks that could play in its favor on the front lines, where the conflict has largely stagnated in recent months. The US main battle tank, in service since 1980, is among the most powerful in the world. In modern versions of the vehicle, layers of depleted uranium armor provide substantial protection to those inside. The United States and its allies have said that Ukraine needs heavy armor as they expand training for Ukrainian forces to fight Russian troops in the country's east. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg this week described the delivery of tanks and other armored vehicles as urgent. Russian forces are expected to begin a new offensive in the spring, and Ukraine aims to launch its own counteroffensive to take back territory occupied by Russia. Tanks will be crucial to giving Ukraine the upper hand. Officials in Ukraine and partner countries say, particularly as allies train Ukrainian forces to perform combined arms maneuvers against Russian forces dug in along the front line in the east. Main battle tanks are heavier and more powerful than the infantry fighting vehicles Ukraine currently uses or will soon receive. They're meant to engage other tanks and break through enemy lines. And their tracks are made for moving across open terrain, similar to the landscape in eastern Ukraine. The Abrams tanks that the United States intends to transfer to Ukraine are the modern M1 A2, not the A1, which the US military has in stock, but they will also be stripped of their so-called secret armor, which includes depleted uranium. The M1 A2 Abrams has more advanced optics and a control system than the A1, which allows for more accurate targeting and a separate thermal camera for the crew commander, allowing him independent identification of targets in any weather and battlefield conditions. The new modification of the tank contains digitized control mechanisms, which allow machines to continuously and automatically exchange information, quickly track the location of allied machines, identify enemy positions, and process artillery requests. At the same time, those Abrams that Ukraine will receive will be deprived of the secret armor packages used by the American military, which include depleted uranium. The USA uses the same practice when selling tanks to other countries. Any modification of the Abrams is significantly more effective in terms of firepower, accuracy, and armor compared to the Soviet-era tanks currently used by Ukraine. However, they are more difficult to operate. Among other things, Abrams tanks have a turbojet engine that uses expensive JP-8 jet fuel, require extensive maintenance, as well as powerful infrastructure, including M88 repair and recovery vehicles to repair broken parts on the battlefield. Currently, it is equally difficult to determine the timing of when Ukraine will receive Abrams tanks. They will be purchased from the industry. Tanks are assembled in only one place, at the state-owned General Dynamics plant in Ohio, which is currently loaded with new orders for Taiwan and Poland. Poland has ordered 250 A2 tanks that will be delivered starting in 2025, but in the meantime is receiving an emergency infusion of 116 M1A1 tanks recently retired by the Marine Corps. Warsaw asked for the tanks to quickly replace the 250 Soviet-era T-72 tanks it gave Ukraine last year, and the shuttering of the Marine Corps tank units made hundreds of well-maintained tanks available immediately. Taiwan ordered 108 M1A2 tanks in 2019, and the first are expected to be delivered in 2024. General Dynamics no longer builds the M1 from scratch, but has a number of M1C vehicles that are bare-bone tanks. When new orders come in, General Dynamics modifies these C vehicles with new technology depending on which variant is selected. But these upgrades are not easy or fast. Rather than sending Ukraine tanks from its own stocks, as it has done with previous weapons, the US has said it is buying the Abrams from industry, meaning they won't arrive on the battlefield for many months or potentially years, given industrial constraints in upgrading them. In the meantime, the US will train Ukrainian forces on how to maintain and operate the tanks, as well as combine arms maneuver tactics to help them integrate the weapons into their overall operations. Either Abrams version would be a significant upgrade from the Soviet-era tanks Ukraine now operates in firepower, accuracy, and armor. But once they arrive, Ukrainian forces will be challenged to keep them in operation, experts said. Those challenges are why the Biden administration pushed the delivery of German-made Leopard tanks, which are easier to maintain and train on. The first Leopards from Germany and other European countries will likely start arriving in Ukraine this spring. Unlike other tanks that use diesel, the Abrams has a jet turbine engine that guzzles JP-8 jet fuel, which is more expensive and harder to maintain. They are also tricky to maintain, and any crew error could trigger the engine to blow. Meanwhile, they require a massive infrastructure, including M88 recovery vehicles to repair broken parts on the battlefield, to operate. The M1 is a complex weapon system that is challenging to maintain, as we've talked about, Pentagon spokesperson Gen. Pat Ryder said Tuesday. That was true yesterday. It's true today. It will be true in the future. How Western combat vehicles bound for Ukraine could change the war. The Kremlin, commenting Wednesday on a possible supply of Abrams tanks to Kyiv, said they will burn like all the rest, and that their potential to help Ukraine has been overestimated, according to Russian news agencies. The Abrams donation could have more symbolic than strategic value. Ukrainian officials urged Washington to approve an Abrams delivery, arguing this would prompt Germany to send its own tanks and break a logjam over dispatching such weapons from around Europe. Those tanks are plentiful across Europe, but deliveries require sign-off from Germany, the manufacturer, which has been reluctant to make such a move unilaterally. The U.S. decision to send Abrams tanks appears to have convinced Berlin, which said Wednesday that it would allow other countries to also deliver their Leopard 2s. Why did the United States hesitate to send the tanks? Biden administration officials previously said the U.S. made tanks which weigh about 70 tons, present logistical difficulties for the battleground in Ukraine. They are heavier than the Leopard 2 tanks. Instead of diesel fuel, which powers the Leopards, the Abrams' multi-fuel engine usually runs on jet fuel, which can be more difficult to supply. Pledges of more modern equipment for Ukraine have also raised questions about how its allies would train Ukrainian troops to use them. U.S. officials have said the Abrams requires complicated maintenance, logistics, and special training. It's expensive. It's hard to train on. It is not the easiest system to maintain, Undersecretary of Defense Colin Kahl told reporters last week after a visit to Kyiv. Throughout the war, U.S. officials have also weighed carefully whether sending Kyiv a particular weapons system might provoke Russia to escalate the conflict. But after discussions with German counterparts, the Biden administration decided to donate the tanks, while Berlin signed off on sending Leopards. Biden said Wednesday that the decision does not represent an offensive threat to Russia, but was intended to help Ukraine defend itself from the truly brutal aggression by Russia. To liberate their land, they need to be able to counter Russia's evolving tactics and strategy on the battlefield in the very near term, Biden said of Ukrainian forces. How many Abrams tanks will Washington send and when? The United States plans to send 31 tanks, enough for one battalion, a Biden administration official told the Washington Post. The delivery could take months, if not years. The delay is partly because the U.S. government will buy the tanks from manufacturers rather than transfer them from existing stocks. They are to be paid for by the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, a fund meant for the purchase of military equipment for Ukraine that the United States does not already have on hand. Ukrainian troops must also be trained on how to operate and maintain the Abrams and incorporate the tanks into offensive operations. The Leopards from Germany and European allies will probably arrive sooner and could shape the battlefield this spring.